Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the actual mechanics of wealth. We are going to objectively break down some of the most dominant and, frankly, fiercely debated financial philosophies out there right now. And more importantly, we're going to stress test them against the hard economic realities of 2026. If you've been feeling totally overwhelmed by the constant flood of conflicting financial advice on your feeds, you are in the exact right place. We have a lot of ground to cover today. We'll start with the big finance debate, look at behavior versus math, break down assets and cash flow, navigate the 2026 economy, and wrap it all up with a modern FIRE blueprint. Let's get right into it. Part 1. The Great Finance Debate. Rich Dad, Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki has been throwing out some pretty intense warnings about a historic market crash coming around 2026 or 2027. He frames it as this incredible wealth-building opportunity, arguing that downturns aren't really about destruction. Instead, they're about the redistribution of wealth to the people who are actually prepared to buy assets at deep discounts. It's an aggressive, highly provocative stance. So, with apocalyptic crass warnings on one side, and the totally opposite just stay the course index investors dominating the other side, what are we supposed to do? We really have to step back and ask a simple question. Which of these systems actually holds up to objective, data-driven scrutiny today? That brings us to Part 2, Behavior versus the Math. First up are Dave Ramsey's famous baby steps. Think about the psychology behind Step 2, the debt snowball. Ramsey is all about aggressively changing human behavior. He wants you paying off debts from the smallest balance to the largest, literally ignoring the interest rates. Why? Because personal finance is wildly behavioral. Knocking out that tiny debt gives you a huge psychological win, creating the momentum you need to just keep going. The absolute foundation of this behavioral approach is the zero-based budget. This system forces you to track every single category, food, gas, electricity, and assign every single dollar a job so your income minus your outgo equals precisely zero. It forces you to squeeze out extra margin to attack your debt long before you ever start thinking about investing. But here's where things get really spicy. When it comes to investing, Ramsey pushes actively managed funds and advisors who usually charge around a 1% fee. And this is a massive clash with the Bogleheads philosophy. Bogleheads, who follow Vanguard founder John Bogle, rely entirely on strict, data-driven investing using incredibly low-cost, passive index funds. Now, here is the mathematical plot twist the Bogleheads always point to. Over a 20-year period, Spiva data, which tracks active funds against the passive S&P 500, shows that more than 90% of actively managed mutual funds actually underperform the market index. That 1% advisor fee, it creates a massive drag on your compound interest. Analysis show that losing 1% to fees and another 1% to underperformance can easily vaporize 25% of your total portfolio over 30 years. That's a huge loss. Plus, Morningstar research completely shatters the idea that you can just pick a winning active fund. If an active fund is in the top 25% today, it has a mere 25% chance of staying there a year later. Pure random chance. What does that mean? It means past performance is largely just random luck, not persistent skill. Moving on to Part 3, Assets, Liabilities, and Cash Flow. This whole concept maps out the infamous rat race. For most folks, their financial story is just endless hard work. Income flows in from a job, goes straight down into expenses and liabilities, think heavy mortgages or car payments, and then right out the door. The money never actually stops on the balance sheet to build any kind of lasting wealth. So the core mechanic of true wealth requires a total structural rewrite of that flow. You have to establish a system that actively acquires assets for your balance sheet. And by definition, an asset is something that independently puts money back into your pocket every single month, whether you are physically clocking into work or not. Which brings us right to return on investment, or ROI. Kiyosaki's philosophy heavily emphasizes that real investors limit their risk by getting their initial cash back as fast as possible. If you can recoup your initial investment purely through cash flow, you can pull that original capital out, reinvest it somewhere else, and leave the first asset just pumping out money for you, basically for free. Part 4, Navigating the 2026 Economy. To actually build a workable portfolio, we have to look at the concrete numbers for 2026. We've got the optimized $24,500 limit for a 401k and $7,500 for an IRA. You also have to bake in the USDA's forecast of a 1.7% food inflation rate. But perhaps the biggest factor is geographic living costs. We're talking a baseline index of 0 in places like Tupelo, Mississippi, soaring all the way up to 238.9 in Manhattan. Where you choose to live mathematically dictates exactly how fast you can build your wealth. And finally, Part 5, the modern FIRE blueprint. So how do we pull this all together? You start by eliminating debt to build some unshakable behavioral discipline. And then you aggressively maximize those 2026 tax advantage limits. You ditch the 1% active advisor fee, embrace passive index funds for the bulk of your portfolio, and simultaneously acquire assets for passive cash flow. For the early retirees out there, you'll want to build a bridge account, standard taxable investments you can access penalty-free before age 59.5. And finally, you carefully manage your taxable income so you don't earn just a bit too much and suddenly lose your Affordable Care Act healthcare subsidies. It really is a resilient, modern wealth machine. By combining strict behavioral control with data-driven indexing and an asset-first mindset, you are putting yourself in total control. So as you evaluate your own financial landscape today, I want to leave you with this question. Is your strategy built on hope and expensive active management? Or are you executing on solid, evidence-based mechanics? Really think about it and start building your blueprint today.